faith, firearms, freedom. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio. This is episode 19, sponsored by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Check out cooksholsters.com. Use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and get 15% off everything in the store. That is cooksholsters.com. So this has been a slow week. It's no matches, nothing exciting. And all my plans for this week's show just completely fell through. I had everything kind of figured out, but things changed at the last minute. I should have been prepared, I guess. So I'm winging it a bit this episode. It'll be a little shorter than last week's, was longer than I expected. Had a lot of material to cover. But Aaron Israel is in Louisville at the NRA Annual Meetings. Every year I tell myself I'm going to go, but for some reason I never do. Usually it's because I don't plan ahead. And so I'm making plans now. Gonna do it next year. I will be there in 2017. Pastor John Bennett and I had planned to fisk another article this week on clinging to God and guns. We had picked out an article from our good friends at the ELCA, the Evangelical Liberal Lutheran Churches in America, but something came up. We had to reschedule. So hopefully we'll get that back on track next week. And I was trying to line up another interview, but just couldn't get it lined up quickly enough. So kind of had to wing it at the last minute, but I've still got some good stuff. On today's show, Sergeant Bill is back. He's got a tip on how to shoot faster. It's something I've been working on in my dry fire this week, and looking forward to sharing that tip with you. Got a couple of stories about the kind of controversies surrounding Target that I'll share with you shortly. And we're going to look at an article I found from National Review by Kevin Williamson called "Criminals Are Unicorns," about how gun control focuses, as we all know, on the wrong people. Why it is destined and doomed to fail every time they try it. So that's what we've got in store for you today. Stick around. It's going to be a good one. Right here on Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi, I'm Taya Kyle, author and veteran family activist. The outdoor lifestyle is one that Chris and I enjoyed together and wanted to expose our children to. Support the organization preserving this lifestyle for future generations. Join the NRA today.
This is Pastor Brian Wolfmueller of Table Talk Radio. Thank goodness you're listening to the Armed Lutheran Radio podcast.
Well, unless you've been on planet Mars for the past month or so, you know the country has been worked up over the question of where transvestites can pee. If you're an alien from Mars and you just arrived on Earth, you'd think that where the gender-confused go to drop a doo was the biggest issue facing the country. Maybe the biggest issue in the world. In North Carolina, HB 2, House Bill 2, was signed into law to combat, I think it was a Charlotte ordinance, which was forcing private businesses to allow men who claim to identify as women to use women's restrooms. That would open up all kinds of possibilities for sexual predators, and the passage of HB 2 wanted to allow companies to make those decisions for themselves. It allows businesses to provide unisex bathrooms or tranny-only bathrooms if they choose, or, like Target, they could allow men into women's bathrooms if you want. No questions asked. Well, liberal Hollywood types like Bruce Springsteen and Maroon 5 have decided they just can't perform in North Carolina in the face of all this horribleness. PayPal has decided to back out of a development deal in North Carolina in response to the passage of the law. The truth is they're all a bunch of hypocrites. PayPal still does business in countries where gays are hanged for their sins. Maroon 5 is still planning on playing concerts in Turkey and Russia where same-sex marriage is illegal. I mean, we're not talking about the mental defectives who think that they're women trapped in men's bodies. We're talking about plain, everyday homosexuals. Target stores have been facing a boycott from pro-family groups, and it seems to be having a pretty big effect. The price of their stock has been tanking. Their first quarter earnings look pretty bad. Their second quarter is not looking very good either. They're hemorrhaging money, but as their CEO put it, they value diversity so much that their policy of letting grown men use ladies' restrooms will continue. And the stories of perverts abusing the policy are surfacing, and liberals continue to caterwaul about so-called discrimination while ignoring the fact that sexual predators have and will abuse the open bathroom policy to gain access to a woman's most private spaces. That brings me to the first of two stories I wanted to comment on today. The first is this. It's another reason for you to never ever shop at Target again. For those of you who like the hashtag #NeverTrump or the hashtag #NeverHillary, let me suggest never Target. Their policy on guns, their policy on open bathrooms was enough for me and my family. We'll never set foot in another Target store, period. But this story is the icing on the cake. If you were not convinced that it's time to take your money somewhere else, just listen to this. Target is suing a man who saved a girl's life inside of a Target store. Let that sink in for just a moment. According to KDKA in Pittsburgh, back in 2013, a would-be murderer attacked a man named Joby Wright on Highland Avenue in Pittsburgh. At that point, he was pursued by Wright and several others, including a man named Michael Turner, and that pursuit ended in a local Target store. Turner went into the store with a baseball bat. Now, you can argue whether or not that was a great idea, but he was determined he was going to stop this guy who had attacked someone out in the street. At that point, he apparently, according to reports, he tried to get out of the store. He stabbed a few people in the checkout aisle, or attempted to stab them, including one of the men who was pursuing him. And then he got his hands on 16-year-old Allison Meadows from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he held her at knife point, telling Turner and the others that he wanted out of the store. He was going to get out. He used Allison Meadows as a human shield. Turner told the man he was not going anywhere until police arrived. And at that point, the man told them he wasn't playing, and he stabbed the girl twice in the back. Now, Wright and Michael Turner and several others attempted at that point to subdue him. And Target is now blaming Turner for the stabbing, claiming that if he had not pursued the man, the stabbing would never have taken place. Target is suing Michael Turner. And the case goes to trial apparently this week, and Allison Meadows' family is trying to help defend the man who saved their daughter. Now, according to Snopes.com, this story is a mixture. Partly true, they claim. You see, Target is not suing Turner for saving Allison Meadows. No. He's being sued for chasing Meadows' attacker in the first place. and endangering the lives of other people in the store. So it's basically splitting hairs. Snopes is typically liberal, so it's not surprising they would characterize the story this way. According to news reports, though, the attacker attempted to stab multiple people inside the store as he was being pursued by Walker and his friends. And he had attacked several people, which led to the pursuit in the first place, long before they got to the Target store. So, according to Snopes, though, quote, "It should be noted that this incident took place back in 2013, and the lawsuits were filed shortly thereafter. This story was likely rehashed in May 2016 as a criticism of Target, which was subjected to a variety of false claims, misleading accusations, and fake news stories after reconfirming its commitment to inclusivity." Well, that's a clever way of lying to your face. The lawsuits may have been filed back in 2013, but they're ongoing, and Michael Turner is continuing to fight the lawsuit against him. Without representation, by the way. According to News Channel 9 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, just this past week, Allison Meadows' father is traveling to Pittsburgh regularly to try to help Mr. Turner. He thanks him every time he sees him for saving his daughter's life. Target stores enable and protect the worst people in our society. They allow perverts into their restrooms. They deny law-abiding citizens their right to keep and bear arms for the protection against men like the one who attacked Allison Meadows. And they sue people like Michael Turner who try to do something about it. On moral grounds, for the safety of your family, for the safety of my family, you'll never see me shop at Target stores ever again. And I suggest you consider doing the same. Be back in a moment with another related story.
If you try to purchase a gun for someone who can't, you can buy yourself 10 years in jail. If a friend or relative asks you to lie to a federally licensed firearms retailer so you can buy a gun for him, don't do it. It's not worth 10 years in jail. Whatever you do, don't lie for the other guy.
This message is brought to you as a public service by the NSSF, the National Shooting Sports Foundation.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. You're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Now keep in mind that what I'm going to discuss here was shared on Facebook with positive comments by a public school administrator in North Carolina. This was in a school system where my wife used to work, where my kids used to go, and or where they used to go to school, and it got under my skin a little bit, and I posted a response to it on Facebook on my personal page, and I just wanted to take a little more time to sort of fisk the whole thing and to give you my thoughts on it and see what you think. This article that was shared is from a mom in Denver, Colorado, and she's clearly a raving feminist lib. It's described by the website where it was posted as a, quote, stellar rant against the vile miscreants trying to ban certain people from using the bathroom. We are miscreants, vile miscreants, for wanting to protect our women, our wives, our daughters, our children from predators in the bathroom. But the people who can't decide which potty to pee in when they get up every day, those people aren't vile miscreants. So keep that in mind. But the mom, Stephanie Hunter, tries to argue that we have bigger fish to fry than keeping men out of women's bathrooms because men are rapists. I'm going to post the link to the original article if you'd like to go have a look for yourself and post some of your own comments, but I wanted to fisk a few of her ironic points. Let me break this down for you, she says. I have a daughter. She's 6. She has the loudest laugh and the spazziest dance moves you've ever seen. I'm not scared by a bathroom. Good. That's great. But given how horrible her daughter's life is going to be based on the rest of this screed, I'd say maybe she should be scared. The mom continues. She's scared of the boogeyman. He's real. He'll rape her while she's walking to her car. It will be her fault. She shouldn't have been walking by herself, of course. So you see where this is going. First off, that's not a function of maleness. It's a function of our legal system where blaming the victim is sort of a sick but common defense. But if you don't teach your daughter that walking by herself in certain situations, some cities, some neighborhoods, after dark, is a recipe for disaster, maybe you need to do a better job of teaching your daughter. Does that mean your daughter will deserve to be attacked? Of course not. But your failure as a parent to recognize that mankind and womankind, just to be fair for you libs, is wicked and sinful, and expecting everything to be hunky-dory in this fallen, sinful world, that's probably a bad idea. He'll grab her. Okay, apologies for some of the language in this article. He'll grab her ass while she's serving him a drink. She'll smile and ignore it because she needs the tip. You know, if your daughter is working as a waitress in a bar, maybe she needs a better job. Try teaching her the importance of getting a good education. And just so you know, if she needs a tip that bad, you suck as a parent. Just saying. He'll pay her less than her male counterparts. Wait, what? The guy in the bar is a patron and her boss? Or he's going to give her less of a tip than the male bartender? I don't get it. Okay. But by the way, the gender gap thing, it's kind of BS. Again, if she doesn't like her pay, maybe she needs to find a better job. He'll make condescending remarks about how she will make, quote, cute babies before he hands her his hotel room key card. So she's working in a hotel bar on top of it. And she can sue the ever-living crap out of him just for that. Don't you know, feminists know how this works? Ask the female in your life if she's ever been scared to walk to her car, had to hold her purse a bit closer, keys in hand, lock the door immediately. Ask her how many times she looked over her shoulder. Look, those things are true. Absolutely. Depending on where you live or where you work, those are absolutely true. But here's my answer. Buy a gun. Teach her to use it. Sign her up for martial arts. Criminals prey on the weak. And just because you wish there were no criminals, the boogeymen as you call them, it doesn't make them go away. And evil has and always will exist. It's always existed. It always will. Stop wishing things were different. Make them different. Ask your sister or your mother or your wife how many promotions she was passed over for, how many men have leered or catcalled her, how many small concessions she's made just to be seen as equal. You know, again, you feminists out there, we have laws about this. I don't know where you've been, but man, would I hate to be this lady's husband. He's got to be miserable. All right, back to the article. She lives in a world that is built for men, rewards men, glorifies men, a patriarchal world where men can make statements like, I need to protect my daughter from freaks in bathrooms, but that doesn't point out the hypocrisy of not protecting them from assault, gender pay gaps, objectification, and abuse. Okay, let me get this straight. Let me get my head around this one. The objectification comes from you liberals and the media. The gender pay gaps we've already addressed. That's BS. Yeah, okay, assault and abuse. Let me get this straight. Your answer to that is to say, well, my daughter's going to be raped anyway, so let's just allow anyone into the bathroom with her. That's a great idea, right? It'll prepare her for the real world. It'll toughen her up. I hate to break it to you, your daughter is less likely to be preyed on in a bathroom by a, quote, freak, and more likely to be viciously raped before the age of 35. Lady, rapists are freaks. And predators will use misguided policies like the one at Target to gain access to your most private spaces for the purpose of spying on you, attacking you. How can you be so dense as to not see this? Oh, yeah, you're a liberal. It makes sense. Scare you? It should. It scares me. My daughter's least worry should be the Target bathroom. Well, I totally agree with you there, lady. So why do you think it's a good idea to allow men into the bathroom with her at Target? So, in keeping with that statement, my daughter's least worry should be the Target bathroom. Why would you allow a fully grown man who says, you know what, I feel like a woman today, to go into the bathroom with her? Because she needs to be prepared for the world we've made for her, and it's a terrifying one. The world is fallen, and it's evil. It has been since the beginning. It always has been. It always will be. It's our duty as parents to prepare our children to face it. But maybe you should be just a wee bit more realistic about your preparations. By all means, she says, go protest at Target because that's the real problem, right? My daughter is 6. We have so much to do. I have to raise a warrior to save her from you. You don't have to save her from me. I'm thinking that you are doing her more harm than I ever will. And as far as raising a warrior, yeah, that's probably not a bad idea. Teach her self-defense. Teach her to stand up for herself. Hey, teach her to use a gun. I'm the one who's going to defend her from the rapist or the mugger or the freak who stalks her in the dark. I'm the one who takes the responsibility for my safety and the protection of my family every day. I'm the sheepdog. I see the world for what it is. Your ideology is blinding you to some of the dangers your daughter will actually face. And you're doing a craptastic job teaching your daughter how to deal with it. Teach your children the dangers of the real world. Yeah, absolutely. But don't teach them irrational fear. Teach them to defend themselves. Teach them to protect themselves. Teach them to stand up for themselves and do the right thing. Because you're not going to be there to protect them all the time. Teach them that men are not evil, but mankind is. Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Silvia.
This is your Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill. Today's topic, shooting faster. It's been in my experience that whether you're doing defensive shooting or competition shooting, that to shoot faster, whether it's a drill or a stage, most of what will make you a faster shooter is doing all the gun handling skills much quicker. And to do that, you have to practice them. You have to get them to where they're basically subconscious. You say, you're thinking reload, and bam, you reload. You need to draw the gun, bam, you draw the gun. You're not thinking about it. You're not going through the steps. You just do it. You've done it enough that it's a practiced motion. Hey, that's kind of what practice is, right? Now, there are some skills that you can do that can actually make your shooting faster, meaning your splits between shots and pulling the trigger faster. Some of the things that I have found that work for me, one of the most important ones that most people kind of don't really practice this that much, and it's really, really important, is what's called a press out. Like when you draw your gun, you're going to press it out from where your hands meet to take your grip and all the way out to where you're on the sights and you're prepping and pressing the trigger. I watch people shoot matches, and you can just watch them on YouTube even, and you'll see there is kind of a punch the gun out, whether it's from a draw or when they get to a position, and they're hunting for the sights. They're hunting for their sight picture, and there's a pause while they stand there and try to get their sight picture, and then they get on the trigger, and then bang. The more you practice that press out, it'll become more automatic, just like all your other gun handling skills, and you'll do it faster without even thinking about it. Now, the easy way to do this is have your gun out, dry fire mode, where it's unloaded, it's all safe, and you've got it down low, maybe in your chest, where if you're moving, you're going to keep it up high, or wherever you're going to have it. If you're practicing for a draw, maybe mid chest is kind of where I hold it, and your support hand is not gripping the gun, but it's indexed underneath that trigger guard, ready to go, and you basically just press it straight out, pushing your arms out from your body, get that sight picture, and you bring it back. Do the same thing over and over, and you just keep doing it, and you'll get faster at it. It won't seem like it at first, but if you do 20 of them every day for a month, you're going to see a noticeable improvement. Being faster on that press out is going to make you quicker to your sights, quicker to prepping your trigger, and ultimately quicker to taking that shot. Another drill you can do is, if you're at the practice range, is you can load up one of your magazines. Hopefully it's a high cap magazine. You can put it up to 15 or 17, 20, whatever it may be rounds. And you're going to, without a target, just shoot into the berm. Stand close to that berm, and you're just going to start out at a moderate pace, and you're going to shoot faster and faster. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to see your sights with no target, no results. You're just trying to watch the sights, watch how the gun is reacting as you pull the trigger faster and faster and faster. You'll get used to tracking those sights. You'll be amazed at how quickly you can pull the trigger and still see your sights and where the gun is going. Now, a key to this is there is no such thing as a perfect sight picture. Unless you have your gun down on the ground and you've got it rested on something, if you're standing there holding it with your two arms, there's no such thing as a perfect sight picture. It's always going to be moving. It's always going to be kind of floating. And this drill is definitely going to show you that. That's where that acceptable sight picture is really going to come into play. Now, Steve Anderson has a deal that he calls speed mode dry fire or live fire. I do it in dry fire. And it's where you need to do something, a skill, fast before you can. You have to know that you can do it fast before you can refine it. So, say in live fire, you're trying to do, you're shooting two targets and they're 3 yards apart, and you're trying to go 2 and transition over and go 2. Well, in speed mode, you're just going to try and do it as fast as you can do it. You're not super worried about the results, where you're hitting on the paper. You're just trying to do it. That way you can see how fast you can do it. You can always slow down a little bit, clean it up and refine it and make it better. One of the dry fire drills that I do with this, straight out of Steve Anderson's Refinement Repetition dry fire book, is the 6 reload 6. So you have simulated targets at 10 yards, and you draw. You shoot 2 on each of 3 targets that are spaced about a yard apart. Then you perform a reload, and you put 2 on each of those targets. When doing this drill in speed mode in dry fire, you're literally just trying to go as fast as you can go to see how fast you can do it. The more you do it, the faster you'll get at it, and then you can always take it back a notch, get into that accuracy mode or match mode, as he would say, and really focus on the sights and making good shots and calling those shots. Last but not least in the skills to help you shoot faster is keeping the gun up. I see a lot of people, and I used to do this too, when you go from one shooting position to another shooting position in a stage or in a drill, whatever it may be, you'll drop the gun down and you'll move quickly, and then you'll get there and raise the gun back up so you could see it and get it to where it is. If you watch professional shooters in USPSA or IPSC or even IDPA, you will see that they keep that gun up high, almost in their eye level when they're moving, so that it is right there and they can get right back on target as quickly as possible. There's no wasted motion. There's no wasted time. Now this means keeping the gun up during reloads, like I said, during movement, and during transitions. I think everybody has seen somebody on the range that'll have a wide transition between two targets, and they'll shoot one, and they do that low sweeping transition, that U-shaped transition to the other one. Straight lines are faster than long, curvy lines. So work on these skills and these drills. Try to videotape your dry fire and or practice occasionally so you can see what you're doing, as we've talked about before, and you should be shooting faster and faster. You'll start surprising your buddies and yourself at how much better and better you're getting. It's always the little things that make you quicker, faster, and better. They add up real fast. This has been your Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill.
So you have your concealed carry permit or license to carry. Now what? Now you need a good holster. Not one of those cheap neoprene prophylactic holsters you can buy in the big box stores. You need a holster custom built for the firearm you intend to carry every day. Check out cooksholsters.com. Made in the USA, Cooks holsters are available in a wide range of colors and designs for inside the waistband or outside waistband carry. They carry a lifetime warranty against defects and a 100% satisfaction guaranteed. Visit www.cooksholsters.com and use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and take 15% off everything in the store. You put in the time and effort to legally carry a firearm for personal protection. Protect your firearm with a custom holster from cooksholsters.com.
Hi, this is Reverend Ken Blanchard, also known as the Black Man with a Gun, and you're listening to my friend and brother from another mother, the Armed Lutheran.
The anti-gunners' answer to the question of violence in our society is an ever-increasing number of laws restricting the rights of law-abiding Americans. As American society becomes more and more secular, more and more depraved and godless, those same people wonder why their laws do nothing to curb the violence that we all deplore. 400 years before the birth of Christ, the philosopher Plato put it best. He said, "Good people don't need laws to tell them to act responsibly, while bad people will find a way around the law." Well, today's liberal Democrats blame the easy access to guns or the guns themselves. They ignore the truth that mankind is fallen and sinful. And because they don't believe in any kind of eternal morality, they believe society defines morality, that we define what's right and wrong, what's good and bad. The availability of guns creates criminals. Poverty creates criminals. Racism creates criminals. And since they don't believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, they fail to grasp what we as Lutherans and as Christians understand as the proper distinction between law and gospel. Our earthly laws serve the purpose of providing a curb for those who might consider committing crimes, and also to serve as a consequence for those who ignore the curb and violate the law anyway. But the curb is not enough. The problem, deep in the heart of the problem, is the sin in the heart of man. And even though all mankind is sinful from birth, there's a very small minority who are exceptionally, unrepentantly wicked, who live in their sins and repeat their crimes while we do very little to stop them. That brings me to an article that I found this week. It was published at National Review, and it's by Kevin Williamson. It's entitled, "Criminals Are Unicorns, and That's Why It's So Difficult to Stop Them." Williamson points out that the criminals who commit the majority of our violent crimes in this country are a tiny minority of the country's criminal class. We know who they are, but our politicians are focusing on law-abiding gun owners rather than the real problem. And I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to read you the whole article, but I've pulled some of the best stuff. Here's Williamson writes, "The evidence of experience has been overwhelming on some questions. So ingrained is the belief that violent crime, especially violent crime in non-domestic settings, victimizing strangers, such as muggings and armed robberies, the kind of crime that we worry about most, is almost exclusively the work of young men, that the question went for many years without being seriously studied. When criminologist Marvin Wolfgang set about formally considering that question in his study Delinquency in a Birth Cohort in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 1945 to 1963, it seemed a foregone conclusion that what he called delinquency was to be a young male phenomenon. He documented the pattern, now taken for granted, of criminality increasing in late childhood, increasing dramatically in adolescence, and then tapering off in adulthood. He began the process of formalizing the folk knowledge that the most dangerous people in any society are men under the age of 25. He also identified a pattern that has profoundly influenced criminal justice policy ever since. The overwhelming majority of serious, violent crimes are committed by a tiny number of habitual offenders. Criminals are a minority, and studies after Wolfgang have estimated that his habitual offenders constitute a tiny minority, about 2%, within that already small minority. Wolfgang spoke of the failure to find a, quote, cure for habitual criminals, and the main response of governments at all levels was to enact repeat offender laws, culminating in things like 3-strike sentencing rules. That way of thinking, as Williamson points out, is what he calls, quote, incurably retrospective. And as I have mentioned numerous times on this show and written about previously, the police are not able to be there to stop crime when it happens. When seconds count, police are really minutes away, and depending on where you live, it could be lots of minutes. So, as instructor Dave Spalding likes to say, you're your own first responder. The police will come when you call, and they'll draw a chalk line around your body. They'll gather up some evidence. They'll take statements, and they'll interview witnesses, and hopefully at some point they'll arrest the guy who killed you. But that's not a whole lot of comfort if you're already dead before the police arrive. Williamson continues, there has been rather less in the way of prospective measures, but the very different reception given to the two main ones, gun control and aggressive Rudy Giuliani-style police practices like stop and frisk, illustrate dramatically how unserious our so-called progressives are when it comes to crime. The gun control policies favored by Democratic politicians like Hillary Clinton and left-wing advocacy groups do almost nothing to address crime because they are not intended to. The left is primarily urban, dominated by academics and intellectuals, and culturally rooted in coastal cosmopolitanism, and as such it is composed of people who view with varying degrees of confusion and detestation America's gun culture. So we've got this paradox of strict enforcement of gun laws against people who are generally law-abiding, you and me, while federal prosecutors and local prosecutors responsible for places like South Chicago will rarely prosecute a straw buyer or lock up somebody who's actually involved in violent crime. So, as Williamson rightly points out, we know who the criminals are, but they're unpredictable. We can't go all Minority Report and detect crime before it happens. So it's easier to, as Williamson puts it, harass, inconvenience, and humiliate licensed firearms dealers and those who do business with them. And when this does nothing to stop the violence, I mean, just have a look at Chicago this year. where murders are up over 60% from the same time last year. I mean, it's a gun control mecca, and yet their quote-unquote gun violence is soaring out of control. The liberal and progressive voices who tell us that their gun control policies will reduce violence, what do they do? What do they do when it doesn't work? Well, there are some sycophants in the anti-gun world, like the Lad Everetts and the Gabby Giffords and old what's-her-name at Moms Demand Action. They still repeat the lies, even when the evidence is against them. But the politicians who enact the laws and who have to face the will of the voters when their policies don't actually work, they respond by moving the goalposts. When the evidence fails to support their claims that their policies will save lives, the push for gun control becomes a moral issue all of a sudden. That leads us to, we got to do it for the children. It's a moral imperative. If it saves just one life, as Joe Biden once said, and President Obama has said several times, all of which is a joke, given the lack of any real morality on the left. When you hear them appeal to morality in support of their policies, then you know that the policies that they're offering have no basis in fact. Just keep that in mind. Williamson goes on to talk about the effectiveness of stop and frisk, which Rudy Giuliani put in place in New York and which helped to reduce violent crime in that city, specifically gun crimes. But the left is opposed to those policies because they claim it's racist, or it won't prevent all crimes, plus it's exceptionally costly because it would overburden the courts. Well, as Williamson points out, when was the last time a liberal cared about the cost of a policy? How much it costs the taxpayers? I mean, look at health care. Look at Head Start, as Williamson points out in the story. Exceptionally expensive with almost no benefit. Williamson concludes his article like this: it's very difficult to take proactive steps against serious violent crime. For one thing, as the ACLU and other critics of three strikes point out, much of that crime is committed without premeditation, and a great deal of it is domestic. And secondly, as argued above, dedicated career criminals of the sort who committed the overwhelming majority of crimes such as muggings and armed robberies are in reality rare, felonious needles in a haystack of relatively low-order criminality. But those criminals do us an important favor by engaging in a little bit of advertising. In New York, practically all murders are committed by people with prior police records. More than 90% of the city's killers have records, and so do half of the victims. Knowing what we actually know about crime and criminals, the evidence supports the very policies to which progressives object: aggressive interdiction, particularly of people illegally carrying firearms, and stiff sentences for repeat offenders. There isn't another policy takeaway from the evidence at hand, says Williamson, but this isn't about evidence, and it isn't about policy. And no matter how much liberal Democrats like Hillary Clinton insist otherwise, it never is. And that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading and subscribing. I hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @ArmedLutheran and like us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/TheArmedLutheran. You can contact us by email at armedlutheranradio@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 855-54-ARMED. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.